Okay, I think we are good to go. So good morning, everybody, and welcome to our July session of Extension Connections, and very happy to be with you here again, and actually coming from my office. It's the second month in a row now we're coming from my office for Extension Connections. And housekeeping things, as always, we are recording this session to make it available to those who might not be able to be on today, but also for those of you who want to go back and review anything in particular. And also we'll be sending this out as well as the slides from today, and then there's going to be a handout or two that we also might be sharing with you today as well. And then also be sure to use the chat box for your questions and comments, and that is a really critical part of what we do in Extension Connections. So our agenda here today, if I get to that, the main thing we want to talk about is industrial hemp and medical marijuana, and Jerry, that may lead into other things, so that's why I put the 3 or 4 dots there, so just be open for any of those kind of things that might come up. And then there's just a couple of extension updates that we want to cover here this morning. And then, as I said earlier, the open Q&A is a very critical part of what we do in Extension Connections. So without further ado, I want to introduce my colleague and friend, Jerry Fankhauser, who's our Assistant Director for the Florida Ag Experiment Station. And Jerry, I appreciate you being here today to talk about this very important, critical topic that we are working on here, not only in Florida, but also the critical work that we're doing here in IFAS. And Jerry comes to us from Purdue, and you might want to mention a little bit to the folks about your background and how critical that is to what we're going to be talking about here today, and then we'll get started.
Sounds great. Good morning. Again, my name is Jerry Fankhauser, and I'm the Assistant Director of the Ag Experiment Station here at the University of Florida. In my previous life, as Dr. Place mentioned, I was an Assistant Director of the Ag Experiment Station at Purdue University, Indiana's land-grant institution. I had a split appointment. I also managed 8 of the outlying research stations at Purdue. And since 2015 at one of those stations, we were involved in industrial hemp research. So I had a first look at this particular type of research, this crop, and I'm glad I'm able to bring some of that experience down to the University of Florida IFAS to work with the agronomists here within our institute. So I'm really excited about that. I did spend 27 years up there, and looking forward to several years down here working in the Office of Research under the leadership of Dr. Burns.
Mm-hmm. All right. How about we get started, Jerry?
All righty.
Let's jump right in. So what is industrial hemp?
Well, industrial hemp is what the state legislature said we're going to have to work on. They passed a statute back in early 2017, something that's been done in 20 states across the United States that allows for pilot program work in industrial hemp. Industrial hemp is cannabis sativa, but it is a low THC, less than 0.3% by dry weight. The THC is the psychoactive part of the plant, and that higher level of THC renders it being called medical marijuana. But the low THC industrial hemp has been planted for thousands of years, and it has a number of impactful possibilities in terms of uses. And for us to understand how those uses may be exploited here in the state of Florida, we need to take a look at it in a research environment. We need to look at plant varieties, cropping systems. We also need to look at invasive risk. I grew up in northern Indiana, and industrial hemp was grown there during World War I, and it's still up there in the ditches. We essentially call it ditchweed. It's not overly invasive, but then again, up in northern Indiana, you have some pretty cold, hard winters too. So different environment here in Florida, and we're going to have to take a serious look at that. We also need to get a good handle on how the processing and commercialization of plant products may be beneficial to stakeholders in Florida and our industry partners.
Move this ahead here. If I bring this up.
There we go. So again, touching on the fact that this is a very unique multi-use crop, there may be opportunities in the fiber industry, textiles, clothing, the food, hemp seed oil, which you can find at a few grocery stores here in the Gainesville area at present. It is also edible, not only from a human standpoint, but possibly as a forage material, feedstock material for cattle. Although feeding trials to date have not been done because it's still a controlled product. And so that is something hopefully we'll get to the point where we can take a look at. Building material, this product, the plant material, the fiber component, can be processed and used for buildings. And it's called hempcrete, kind of a concrete type of product. And so there's some opportunity there too. Now, where industry really sees the value early on is the CBD oil, cannabidiol oil, from a medicinal standpoint. And we'll touch on that just a little bit later on a couple of slides talking about opportunities in that environment.
Is there a particular area where this really does well geographically in the
That's
US?
a great question. You know, where does industrial hemp grow? It's been shown to grow in many different environments, but traditionally it was grown in the upper Midwest, up into Canada, Europe. And so the varieties that are currently out there for the most part have been varieties developed, bred, commercialized in northern environments. And of course the day length variance is different up in the northern US or Europe. And so for us to bring those varieties down to Florida at this particular latitude, it's going to be interesting to see how they perform. And another good reason why we need to take a serious look at that.
Very good. Medical marijuana.
Okay, so that's a little bit about industrial hemp. Let's move into the type of biotype of the plant that we cannot work on, and that's medical marijuana. So again, the same species, Cannabis sativa, leaves another plant material with a higher than 0.3% THC. And so you have elevated levels of THC, that is the psychoactive component. Under a medical regime, though, it's that component that can be used to treat diseases, also treat conditions, and those are noted on the slides if you can view those. Post-traumatic stress, pain and nausea, and in certain states like Colorado and California, medical marijuana prescriptions are being issued for the treatment of these particular ailments, conditions, and but it's very clear in statute and at the federal level, and in Florida interprets the federal statute very closely, that we cannot do any research investigations with medical marijuana.
Right.
So what you'll see from our research team, which I'll be touching on in a few moments, will strictly be in the industrial hemp arena.
Okay.
Next slide.
So, pilot project.
Pilot project. Again, over 30 states at some level are now working on a pilot project with industrial hemp. It's called pilot project because most of the efforts based on statute, federal and states, has limited the activity to land-grant institutions, colleges of agriculture, and also state departments of agriculture. And so in certain states, the universities will take the lead. Other states like Kentucky, the State Department of Agriculture in Kentucky has a very active role in their industrial hemp program. But it was the Farm Bill of 2014 that opened the door to industrial hemp research getting back into the field and being legal. The problem with the 2014 federal Farm Bill and the statute contained therein is that industrial hemp, like marijuana, is still a DEA Schedule I plant material. And so it really limits in terms of what can be approved for research, how seed can be secured, and what can be done essentially out in the field. There's real limitations. It's awful hard to commercialize something that's still considered controlled and scheduled from a DEA standpoint. As I noted early on in my talk, in 2017, the Florida State Legislature approved statute 1004.4473, which did allow for the land-grant institutions in the state, and that's the University of Florida, IFAS, and FAMU, to do industrial hemp pilot projects. We assembled a team soon after and began the process of getting through all the approvals. That included getting approvals through FDACS, the Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services. At this point, we have temporary planting permits, and that has allowed us to get our DEA Schedule I permit, which we secured in mid-June here, about just over a month ago. And so we are set to go with our permits in terms of doing field research. and that's going to allow us to procure or secure certified industrial hemp seed.
Yep.
One last item we also needed approval was from our board of trustees at the university. So we had to come up with a research plan. We had to present that plan, and that was done back in March at a board of trustee meeting, and we did receive written approval, and that approval did allow us to finish out our permit request with the Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services.
Very good.
Next slide. So what is our research plan? Basically, the goal for us is to work to support the future viability and sustainability of an industrial hemp industry, and that is in the state of Florida. That is our focus. The opportunity that has been opened up through the Florida statute is the IFAS Industrial Hemp Pilot Project. And the agronomists that have come together to form the team, their plan is to obtain, and we have been successful in obtaining industry-funded research to do outreach and to conduct field studies at facilities with a multidisciplinary team composed primarily of agronomists, but we're going to include others in that effort. And I should note that initially we are focusing on board of trustee owned and operated facilities, and that includes our research and education center properties. We are not going to get into an environment where we're on grower fields early on. There's just too much of a liability issue. And IFAS is assuming all that liability in terms of invasiveness, in terms of essentially goofballs running around and doing things out in our fields we don't want to have happen. So it's important for us to maintain as much control, as much security as we can do. And so we are definitely staying on, at this point, 4 different properties within IFAS's rec system.
Ready?
Yep. So our activities early on will be to secure at least 31 certified industrial hemp varieties. And we will secure those, and we will get them ready for planting. We start as early as late fall this year at our location at the Tropical Research and Education Center in Homestead. And so it's important for us to be ready as we head out the farm gate, because once we put seed in the ground, we are on the clock. We are on the 2-year pilot program clock. And so state statute is very clear that this is a 2-year effort with a report due to the governor of the state of Florida and the state legislature after 2 years. And so we want to make sure we have everything ready to go before we get that first initial study in the ground. And at this point, all indications are it'll make the most sense to do that down in the southern part of the state. We're going to be looking at agronomic factors such as germination, the viability of the seed we are securing, flowering, height, plant material yield, biomass, and seed yield, disease, and then we also have to test for THC level, active component that's contained in cannabis sativa, and also CBD oil, which the industry is very interested in with these different varieties. Planting date trial, we will include maybe varying planting dates at different locations across the state. In year 2, we may look and break this down into the best cultivars and run with those and try to do a little more work just on X number of cultivars and industrial hemp seed. We will look at field investigations, but we will not exclude greenhouse production of industrial hemp. We just don't have that on the slate here early on. But one area we may get into is maybe modifying day length, because industrial hemp is day length sensitive. There are day length neutral varieties out there. And of course, down here in Florida, we're going to need to monitor that very closely for maximum flowering and seed production. And so that's to look at. In terms of invasiveness, again, up in Indiana, I mentioned we still see wild industrial hemp that was grown upwards of 100 years ago, still in ditches. So in Florida, we don't have hard freezes, and we're going to need to take a close look at what exactly is the risk of this plant getting out into the ditches up and down the state, into our waterways, and into fields, and becoming more of a nuisance than a potential crop to benefit growers. And so Dr. Luke Flory in the Department of Agronomy is taking the lead on the invasive studies with industrial hemp as part of a pilot project team.
Okay, thanks, Jerry. So I got a couple of questions, but
Yes.
before I ask, I saw that one or two people raised their hands. So if you would, go ahead and type your question or comment into the chat box, and I will deal with those as they come in. So please do that. You mentioned about the 2-year.
Yes.
And so that when we first do that planting, the 2-year window or calendar starts. So when are we looking to put in those first seeds? Like, what is there a particular ballpark time frame?
My gut feeling right now with where we're at, we could establish our first study at TREC Tropical down at Homestead, possibly in November, December of this year. And we'll know more as the research team meets and we get through some of the logistics and we actually get the seed in hand and begin to get our varieties put together. But we want to be very thoughtful. We want to do the right thing. We also have to look at our control measures. FDAX is going to want us to have a biosecurity plan in terms of not only security to keep people out of our research area, but also to minimize any volunteer seed moving away from the study site.
Okay. So in addition to all of the things that we talked about here, Jerry, what about research such as with using this for animal feed and looking at nutrition of industrial hemp?
I think those type of investigations are going to have to come through with Farm Bill modifications in 2018 or a change in federal statute through, say, Senator McConnell's new legislation that's been entered into Congress. At present, it is not legal to do such feeding trials.
Right.
And so we're excluded from getting in that arena. But certainly, I think we got to keep an eye on that ball because the state of Florida is a significant beef cattle cow-calf state. And so we may be able to exploit the multi-crop benefits, the multi-beneficiary products from industrial hemp, whether it's fiber, whether it's seed, or some of these varieties are dual use, seed and fiber. And so maybe we can harvest seed and the fiber can go to a feeding operation for our beef cattle.
Okay, good deal. So go ahead, research team.
So the research team, early on, within the Department of Agronomy, within IFAS, expressed a desire to be a part of this team. We also have an economist, which is important for the marketing and industry assessment part of this pilot project. Dr. Robert Gilbert is the agronomic departmental chair, and he's been the lead doing all the heavy lifting along with Dr. Zach Brim down at Tropical Research and Education Center in terms of putting together paperwork, securing the DEA permit approval. And so those two gentlemen have led the effort to get the pilot program together and the approval secured to this point. We also have agronomist John Erickson, who's going to be the Central Florida lead in doing the field studies. We have a team of researchers, Dr. Mike Mulvaney from West Florida and Dr. Josh Freeman at North Florida Quincy that'll be doing the work, the field studies at the Quincy location, north of campus here in Gainesville. Dr. Luke Floria, I mentioned Luke already, is going to be doing the invasive risk analysis. Most of that invasive work will be done here right on campus. Then Dr. Gilly Evans down at Tropical Research and Education Center will be our economic analyst, a faculty member taking the lead on looking at the data, working with industry, and helping to put together a report that talks about industry potential. And obviously our stakeholders, industry partners, and FDAX very interested in what the economic potential impact of industrial hemp in Florida is. Me, I'm kind of that all-around logistics guy. I'll be transporting the seed around the state, working on documentation, the record keeping, which is critical if you're going to maintain DEA compliance, sort of keeping us all out of jail kind of activities. So, and that's important, and that's part of my job, not unlike what I did up at Purdue University with the Industrial Hemp Pilot Project there. So,
we do appreciate you keeping us out of jail, Jerry.
That's very important, yes.
Yeah. So Matt Smith asked, will there be an economic analysis? And I think you kind of touched on that a little bit.
That is the goal. That's actually outlined, Matt, in statute. So that's very important for us. Now, one of the challenges, and this is kind of a side note, is it's hard to take what we're going to obtain in agronomic field studies and do a full-blown economic analysis on how it could impact the whole state, because there's so many different facets to the plant products of industrial hemp, And our ability to analyze and post-process plant products like CBD oil, we're not sure how much of that will be approved, how much we can get done. And this is only a 2-year pilot program. So I think there's a lot of expectations here, and I think we're going to do good things, but we have to temper the enthusiasm maybe from some of the stakeholders, and you may be hearing that through the phone calls to your extension offices, to what we can realistically do in a 2-year time frame, given what is legal and what is considered illegal.
Good deal. All right. Field locations.
Field locations. I've noted Tropical Research Education Center as possibly our first location to establish a winter crop varietal trial down there. We also are looking to have, and these field studies are going to be 5 to 8 acres, so they're not large. They're going to have buffer and other biosecurity control measures, and they're going to be at 4 locations: North Florida, Tropical, the Agronomy Forage Research Unit, which is north of Gainesville here in northern Alachua County, and then Dr. Luke Flore is going to do his invasive work here at Bivens Arm, adjacent to campus. I should note that this photo off the web. Actually, I kind of did, but our people took that photo. That's the Industrial Hemp study at Purdue University, and that is in actually a certified organic area, which is interesting. And it is not possible to certify industrial hemp as organic right now because of the controlled nature of plant material. And so that's a real challenge, because there are universities like Purdue and like the University of Vermont that are doing organically industrial hemp in an organic environment, but we can't call it organic certified research. So that is something that, if the statute changes, may open up opportunities for those that want to pursue certification and grow industrial hemp in that type of environment.
So, Jerry, what kind of security is going to be around each of these 4 sites?
Well, depending on the location of the actual field study, and I can tell you early on, we're not going to act where these are, because we do understand there's X amount of goofballs in the world. And when goofballs become aware that there's a plant material that looks like marijuana, the potential for theft or vandalism will increase. So these studies are going to be put possibly in the back parts of our research and education centers. Where we deem useful, we'll employ fencing. As you can note in this slide, we're going to use cameras, and those will be on rolling tape, so to speak, kind of old technology, but we'll have access on a 24-hour rolling cycle to kind of view in case there is any damage or trespass into the areas. Beyond that, we just hope to maintain daily observation of the studies. And, we haven't seen much of an issue up north, and other states haven't seen an issue. Most of it is just more, once in a while you get youngsters that want to venture in there and possibly steal, which affects data, so we don't want to see that happen.
Yeah. Goofballs, or knuckleheads, as we call them.
Knuckleheads, that's a great term too.
So we have some workshops coming up.
We do, and we have proposed to do 3 different workshops, and there is a flyer on that, and we can get that to you in PDF form. The first one will be at North Florida Research and Education Center in Quincy on August 9th, followed by on Friday at the Plant Science Research and Education Unit in Citra. And then the following Monday, we'll be down at Homestead at the Tropical Research and Education Center. And these workshops are to not only update potential growers and others that may be interested in getting involved in growing industrial hemp when it becomes legal in the state of Florida to do so, but also for interested industry partners, because state statute does outline the opportunity for IFAS to certify qualified program partners. Those are industries that have a principal business in the state of Florida that want to work with the University of Florida, IFAS, for the benefit of developing industrial hemp industry in the state. And so we think the afternoon session will focus on industry questions and interests from our point of view that we want to pass along to industry. But in the morning, we hope to fill a room full of growers, potential growers, I need to say potential growers, to update them on where we are with this pilot program and how state statute or federal statute could change the environment in terms of opportunity to grow industrial hemp in Florida. I would also encourage extension agents, other states, faculty and staff that are interested in learning more about this, or their phones are ringing off the hook to consider attending, or at least getting a synopsis of what our different workshop events produced in terms of information. So you're welcome to register and attend if you deem this interesting or see it as an interest for growers in your area.
Is there a particular segment that they should go to, morning or afternoon, or both would have different components that would be of interest to them?
That's a great question, because field extension deals, I would say primarily with growers, those that come into the office, and on-farm visits, etc. I think the morning session may be the session to attend, but if you're going to be there, and we have people that are registering for both, so certainly they want to hear all that we have to say. And I think there's going to be some really good discussion at these meetings on what people in the industry are seeing. You know, Florida is very unique relative to the northern Corn Belt in terms of we're going from somewhat subtropical to literally a tropical environment. And so what we can do with certain varieties may be quite a bit different than what we can do in the plant concentrations of different plant products. May be different. So we need to understand that. We need to hear from industry and what they're seeing, and possibly exploit this for the benefit of Florida industry and our stakeholders.
Very good. So I'd encourage our folks to attend as possible, and be sure to go to that link to register. And again, we'll be sending this out, so you'll be getting this directly. So some interesting things in the Farm Bill, perhaps.
There is, and this is a frustration that universities, State Department of Agricultures have had, because industrial hemp, like I've noted a few times in this discussion this morning, is a controlled and regulated plant product. So the ability to expand research, to look at feeding trials, to look intensively at plant products, and field growth and development is limited. And so Senator McConnell from the state of Kentucky, and Kentucky's been a leader in industrial hemp work early on, has introduced federal legislation to possibly take industrial hemp off the Schedule I list. And if that happens, that will essentially open the farm gate for a lot of work done, including grower level participation in industrial hemp growth. So that can be a good thing or a bad thing. The problem, I think, with just getting this out across fields and buying seed, getting it out in a farmer's field, is we don't know how these varieties will perform in different environments in the state of Florida. Soil types, the need for irrigation, what the adequate, the proper fertilizer and other crop input regime may be. So we need to take a look at this to get a better handle in our environment, because certainly the silty clay loam soils and the shorter growing seasons in Indiana is tremendously different than our environments down here. So it's important that we take a really good look at this early on. So this may happen. We're hearing that there is a good chance. Senators are lining up behind this. Stakeholders are asking for it. The Association of Public and Land Grant Universities are firmly behind this, the legalization of industrial hemp from a research and commercialization standpoint. And so I think it's important for us at IFAS is to do this early work, but stand and be ready that if this type of legislation does clear, we're able to get information out to growers as soon as possible.
Yep, absolutely. So that takes us up to the questions and discussion part of, we're taking a break right now before I get into extension updates. But any of you that have questions, comments for Jerry, anything related to what he's talked about related to industrial hemp, medical marijuana, this is a good time to ask those questions. So Jerry, the first one that has come in, did we say that we're going to send out the dates of these workshops so we can pass on?
We certainly can, and I can get a PDF copy of the workshop announcement, and that would be a great way for extension to disseminate.
Okay, so then they can push that out to growers.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know about you all across the state. I'm getting calls in my office from those that want to attend the workshops. They want to grow a field of industrial hemp this year. There's been some misinformation and confusion because the way the statute was written, it sounded like growers might have an opportunity to participate. And certainly if you can interpret it that way, but again, the liability is very extreme and it is a controlled product. So we feel, like many other universities, it's important to limit our investigations to university-owned properties. So we want potential growers to be excited about it. We want them to participate, but know that in 2018 and possibly even into 2019, it is not legal for them to grow industrial hemp. So I will get that PDF to your office.
So yes, Barbara will be pushing that out. So Sarah Davis, would be great to also get a PDF of the talking points or websites we could refer to them.
We can do that.
Okay.
Yep.
So Sarah, good point. We'll be sure to get that
We do
out.
not at present have an industrial hemp IFAS website, but that's something we did have up north, and I think that would be important. I think after these workshops, that should be one of our tasks, to get something kind of a one-stop shop for where we are on our research pilot program. And we can also give informational links in that to where Congress is on potential legislation, that type of thing.
Good point. Thanks, Jerry. So here's a question I knew we would get from Jane. What is the UF IFAS policy now when clients are called about growing marijuana?
Yeah, if clients are interested in growing marijuana, they should do so at their own peril, because it is illegal. And not only below 0.3 THC, but above 0.3 THC will get you in a whole heck of a lot of trouble, as my parents would say. So, and UF IFAS is not engaged in any marijuana research. We are told that doing so or requesting to could put our federal grant sponsorship in jeopardy. So
That's exactly right.
We're not doing any research investigations. All of our work done either in greenhouse, controlled environments, or out in the field is going to be with certified varieties, which are below 0.3. Interestingly enough, and this has happened in Kentucky, if a field or any treatment, any variety is found to be above 0.3 THC, we have to immediately destroy that study. We cannot take it to yield. And this has cost a few growers in Kentucky their fields of industrial hemp.
That's right.
And so until this product or this particular species is deemed legal, there is some peril to growing industrial hemp. And we're going to be testing for THC throughout the growing season. And we are a little concerned because drop stress is one of those indicators of raising THC levels.
That's right.
So this is important that we do the good work here before we expose growers to some of the challenges that they may be facing.
That's a good point, Jerry. So if the Farm Bill 2018 passes, then would we not need a license for growing and research?
We would have to take a close look at what that statute says at the federal level. I think it would also involve some state action, at least from FDACs, on what could and could not be allowed. Because one thing that I'm not talking about right now that I talked about previously is we still have this invasiveness issue. And even though something's legal to grow in the United States, there are certain restrictions on different plant species, varieties, what have you, in the state of Florida because of our environment down here. Mm-hmm. Yep. And so that still needs to be looked at very closely. So that would be a stay tuned answer there.
So here's an interesting one. As the current legislation in Congress would decriminalize hemp at the federal level and give states the power to choose hemp's legal status, has the university been in contact with candidates for governor as their stance on industrial hemp's future in Florida?
I don't think university administrators have, but I do think the industry has, and stakeholders working through associations like the Florida Farm Bureau. I know they're getting questions. Kevin Morgan with the Florida Farm Bureau, we're keeping him updated on where we're at. Mm-hmm. I think those discussions are probably going to be driven more by associations, whether it's the Hemp Association of Florida or producer groups like the Florida Farm Bureau. That's probably a baton that they will carry. We're here to respond to those requests. And as directed by statute, doing those things that we are good at doing, such as research and extension activities with industrial hemp, we'll do that end of the business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you've said that well, Jerry, in that the university has not really dove into that in regards to getting into the politics of this. But I think you're right. As far as those kind of questions related to the politics and all that, we'll leave that to the commodity groups, the associations, and things like that.
And this would be a good time to bring up the fact, and we had this challenge in Indiana. We have a certain proportion of our stakeholders, and many of you or all of you know this, that are very conservative in nature, and we appreciate those values. And some of them are opposed even to industrial hemp production. And because it's the same species, there may be religious or other objections. And we need to be very clear that this is low THC biotypes. That what we're trying to do is develop an industry that can produce food and fiber and possibly legal medicinal benefits. We are not at this time, nor do we foresee anytime soon, working on medical marijuana. Our focus is on a crop that may be taken to the fields up and down the state of Florida, and that is our goal. And so if you hear of those objections, are faced with them, we need to be very clear that we're focusing on industrial hemp from a food and fiber standpoint and other products.
Very good point, Jerry. So here's Pen Tien, a plant diagnostician working with the UF Plant Diagnostic Center. Is a policy that we cannot advise on or receive samples of these hosts remain unchanged?
I believe that is true at the current time. We will be looking at these samples here in Gainesville. We have to maintain control of the plant material as we take a look at it. So certainly in that type of environment, controlled environment, we wouldn't want you all to have plant samples being mailed that could be construed as illegal shipment of plant products. We don't want the growers to do that if they're doing that illegally. You don't want to receive it. And so any of that type of work we're going to do with our plant products here in Gainesville. So I don't see any of that changing, at least in 2018, 2019.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. And you're welcome, for sure. So I don't see any more at this point. So let's move on, Jerry, and I'll hit on a couple of things I want to hit on, and then we'll come back for potential further questions that folks might have. Just two really quick updates that I have for you. And first of all is EPAF conference that'll be coming up in just a month, and we'll be at the Sawgrass Marriott in Ponte Vedra. And we've been there a number of times in the past. It's a great place for us. We'll pretty much have full reign of that facility. A couple of points I wanted to make in relation to this is we really see EPAF as your opportunity for professional development, lots of opportunities to recognize award winners, both those internal as well as external award winners and partners. We always appreciate connecting with them. We'll have a time for retirees to be there, and they always appreciate reconnecting with our faculty in IFAS Extension. And it also is a great opportunity for networking, reconnecting. Always look forward to having both the county and the state faculty there to give an opportunity for conversation, dialogue. We'll have some opportunity for teams to be meeting. So it is a wonderful opportunity to bring all of the family, so to speak, together. Registration is looking really good. And if you've not registered, I encourage you to do so, because you certainly don't want to miss out on this. A couple things of interest. Wednesday of that week is opportunity for some professional development and tours. And that evening we'll have the Dean's Dinner and Auction, and I always look forward to that. And those of you who have items to bring in for the auction, be sure to get those to David Nisler. He's in the process of gathering those items. And then also, those of you who would like to buy these items, be sure to bid early, bid often on these things in order to bring in some funds that we invest in EPAF on professional development scholarships and things like that. It goes to a great purpose. And then on Thursday, the last day of EPAF, that is our admin segment that day. And we also are having a keynote speaker, Jones Laughlin, who knows a lot about land grant systems and extension in particular. I think you'll really appreciate what he has to say. He's a very great motivational speaker. So we're definitely looking forward to that, and looking forward to seeing you all there. And Jerry, I understand you're going to be there with us. Correct. And if this would be a great opportunity for you to gang up on Jerry, ask all your hard questions.
Appreciate that.
That you might have about it, industrial hemp or anything such as that. So again, I always look forward to EPAF and seeing many of you there. The second thing is, I talked about this last time, and we're going through some revamps of our Extension Admin website. And again, to remind you that there are two real purposes of this. One is an internal purpose, and having an opportunity to bring together all these disparate websites that we have out there right now, so that we have a one-stop shop where we can put anything related to policies, procedures, or templates that you might need, or anything related to promotion and tenure, permit status and promotion, and things like that. And having that all in one place to make it easy for access and availability. And so that's going to be one part of this. But then the second aspect of this is the external face of IFAS Extension, and using this website in a way that we can really portray who we are, the messages that we want to be pushing out to external audiences, but then particularly use this as a better tool for recruiting faculty to come in and apply for jobs here in IFAS Extension. There will be a survey going out from Franco Media Group, and that should be going out very shortly. If Dr. Ruth Borger is on, perhaps she can give us an update about when we might be seeing that. Not to put you on the spot, Ruth, but in case you know more about that. But again, be on the lookout for that. And your input on this is extremely critical to make sure that we're focusing this in the right direction. I am planning to give some previews of this at EPAF, so be looking forward to that as well. So they're the two things I wanted to hone in on, and then as you see here on the slide, this is an opportunity for questions and discussion. One other thing, I don't have a slide on this, but it might warrant some conversation, that is on the Farm Bill. And so, Jerry, you mentioned that one of the things that the Senate is looking at is this whole legislation that Senator McConnell brought forward. And just to let you know where the Farm Bill is right at this time is the House has voted to move it to conference, and they've identified a number of Republican and Democratic congressional members that'll serve on the conference committee to work with the Senate. The Senate is going to be taking that up this week to move it to conference. They'll be identifying somewhere between 12 and 15 senators that will be part of this committee to work on a joint farm bill. The overall plan is to have this done within about 3 or 4 weeks. So we'll see what happens because the current farm bill expires the end of September. If we don't have a farm bill, what happens is that current one moves into continuing resolution, which is basically continuing the same course. But the goal is to have a farm bill done and voted on by both the House and the Senate, and also approved by the President for inaction on October 1. So we shall see about that. Lots of things we're watching in the farm bill. What Jerry talked about is certainly one piece. The other is the effort related to nutrition education that I've mentioned to this group in the past a number of times. Again, as a reminder, the effort on the House side is to have one combined nutrition education program that would bring together what we do in FNEP and SNAP education and bring that together under the guidance and direction of the land-grant university. And in states that have both the 1862 and 1890s, there would be an expectation that those institutions work together on one overall nutrition education program for the state. That is not in on the Senate side, so we'll have to see how that all works out. There was a lot of debate and discussion about work requirements for SNAP and the level of SNAP benefits, so SNAP is going to be a huge debate, I will say, for this conference committee. That'll be happening in weeks. The other thing that we're keeping our eye on as well is something that's going to affect our sister institution, Florida A&M, FAMU. And there's an amendment that was introduced on the Senate side that is redirecting $4 million of the current 1890 money to the new land-grant institution in Ohio, Central States University. And so rather than making the pie bigger, they've taken the pie and sliced out 4 million. So it's going to restrict and cut down the amount of funds that the 1890s get. So we're watching that one as well as a whole host of other things. So just wanted to give you the update on that too. So this would be a good chance. We have several minutes left here. Jerry, we can take questions or comments that folks may have. There's a couple things that came up. I'll ask you about, Jerry, going back to your topic. And before we got started, and that was what's going on in Canada. I think this has already been legalized there, and with what Senator McConnell is looking to do, that would basically put us on equal footing. And I think it might be good for you to bring folks up to speed on that.
There's a couple of activities up in Canada that differ from the United States. One is industrial hemp production is legal, and they can certify organic industrial hemp, which captures a certain segment of the market. Senator McConnell and others would like the U.S. to be on the same footing, which is one of the reasons why his particular legislation has been introduced, and get us on equal footing with countries like Canada. The other issue is recently the nation of Canada has approved recreational marijuana use, and that has really opened the door up there. Some of their vegetable production industries now are trying to retrofit, re-gear, and capture the value they see in their glasshouse production with medical marijuana. But also, we've been visiting with a few of those companies in Canada that want to exploit some of the benefits of industrial hemp in a controlled environment. And that's something that if we can get accomplished here within the next 2 years of our pilot program, we hope to work directly with those companies and become a leader here in the state with the amount of glasshouse production we have in Florida, coupled with the ability to take that to the field literally at any time of the year. That's a comparative advantage, and we need to exploit that. So we're excited about that, but I think us in the United States, we have to understand the landscape's changing around us in other countries, and if we want to remain competitive and to grow a crop that's perceived as more sustainable than many of the crops we're currently growing, we need to take a serious look at industrial hemp.
So, Jerry, we've hit just a little bit on Florida A&M University here. So they also are involved in this. So you might want to mention specifically what they're tasked to do, and do we have any connection with what they're doing with Florida A&M?
As outlined by Florida state statute back in 2017, the land-grant universities in the state were authorized to pursue a pilot program. Of course, that includes IFAS here at the University of Florida, and also FAMU. We were early on getting the approvals, but FAMU is following that process also. I'm told that the research team at FAMU went before their board of trustees in June. I did not see a release or hear of the outcomes, so maybe some of you out towards Tallahassee might have seen something in print, but my understanding is they're making inroads. We communicated with them early on, but we're unsure as to and what detail their particular pilot program is and what it will look like. But we have communicated. We shared our research plan with them so they know what we're doing. So I think the potential to communicate and have dialogue and work through some of the pitfalls that other states like Kentucky and Indiana work through early on, we have that information and we'll freely share that. So that's all I know about FAMU at this point.
Okay, good deal. So Tom Yeager asked, is it okay to answer plant production questions from growers of medical marijuana?
Oh, that's a tough one. Because, I kind of equate this like growers asking about cocktails for weed control applications. People used to write stuff down, and that's going off label. And here you're going off of what's approved on state and federal laws. I think you can talk in general terms about plant growth and development in terms of drought stress effects. The effects of, say, a plant growth regulator, dicamba, on plant symptomology. But I would not make any attempts to be very specific on how to help a grower raise a more profitable marijuana plant, basically. That's something we want to stay away from right now. Certainly, and this is obvious, that what we learn down here in Florida with agronomic field studies with industrial hemp may translate to medical marijuana, either in controlled environment or, say, years down the road, we get to the field. But one has to be extremely careful that we separate ourselves from any discussion, agronomic or otherwise, about assisting stakeholders with marijuana production. So that would be my cautionary response.
Yeah. So Jerry, I think you answered that really well. I would confirm what Jerry is saying, Tom and others, is that we want to be really careful of that because if we go too far down that road, or if there's allegations that we or faculty have gone too far down that road, it could really jeopardize our federal funding that we have, because this is a federally controlled substance, and that's really why we have to steer clear of anything related to medical marijuana.
Right. And I know it's difficult for some of your extension staff because there are places in the state where greenhouse producers have permits to grow medical marijuana, but we can't receive those samples when there's issues into our diagnostic lab, and we're not supposed to be walking those greenhouses making recommendations. And so that's a tough situation for us to be in, because we're there to help stakeholders be successful. And in the natural resource arena, this is a crop, in their case, that is legal for them to grow, albeit under a federally tightly controlled and state controlled process. And so hopefully we'll get to the point where that picture is clear. But right now, I would caution all of us on the research side and all of you on the extension side from getting ourselves into a situation where we're making any recommendations.
Yeah. So great question, Tom.
That is a great question.
Thanks for asking. And give you one last call for questions, and one more that has come in, Jerry, and that is in relation to understand there's some processing issues related to industrial hemp, and there's some things that we need to be worked through with that. Would that be part of what we would be able to cover with our pilot projects? Or are we going to be looking at that at all?
We are, and we're not sure of the logistics because if we hand off plant material, if we hand off CBD oil to industry, we're still liable for that plant product. And so we may have to maintain some sense of control, but we would like to take plant products and get them looked at, especially by our industry partner, our qualified one, Green Roads West, who is initially our first sponsor of this research in 2018. But the logistics are a little interesting because the University of Florida, IFAS, is assuming all the liabilities. So FDAX is very supportive of these type of investigations. So I think we'll get there, but I don't know how far we're going to ship samples off of the campus of Gainesville. So that's yet to be determined. Good question.
Okay. So Matt Smith asked, are there any legal obligations for extension agents when contacted by someone with questions about existing crop of cannabis? That's a good question.
That's a good question. And putting on my extension hat, I used to work closely with Extension up north. I would say we are not in a position to advise or provide any type of information. I would recommend that if you're looking for such information, you seek resources in a state where that's legalized. And certainly I can assure you there are cannabis producers that are looking to information out of Colorado, whether it be Colorado State, or looking at Canada where that's allowed in the medical arena, and now recreational because of recent legislation. Again, you want to create that distance, nothing in writing. This is not what we're able to do. But, there exists, especially online resources, because there are states. And that's the really crazy thing about where we are with this particular plan, is that some states view it differently and federal government views it differently. And here in the state of Florida, we probably have legislators that are viewing it differently, even though the statute's been passed. So that's just one we have to pursue very cautiously.
Yeah, so that's a very good question, Matt. And so yes to what Jared just said, but I think kind of reading between the lines of what he might be getting at here is that if somebody that is growing cannabis comes to us, are we obligated to turn that person in? I'm not sure, Matt, if you're getting to that.
And maybe that was the question.
And
I'll let you handle that response.
So thank you. And what I would say, Matt, is if that's what you're getting at, let me check with our general counsel office to see what kind of obligations that we might be under, if that's what you're trying to get at with your question. So if you send me a follow-up on that, and then I will follow up as appropriately to look into that further. But very good question. So I don't see any more questions, Jerry, and I don't have anything else here. So let's go on and wrap this up. And thank you, Jerry. Excellent information you shared here today. So I appreciate you being on and today to talk about this very important topic. And also to let you know, we have no extension connections in August, and that's because we'll all be at EPAF. And so I look forward to seeing you all there. It's a great opportunity for me to catch up with many of you as well. So that'll wrap it up, and we're even a couple minutes ahead, Jerry, so we're doing good here. Thank you all for being on. Jerry, thank you again, and I hope you all have a great rest of your week. And as always, go Gators.
Take care.